Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Jamie. This is Spencer.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Jamie in particular, because Jamie's been traveling all around the world and is about to go traveling again. So it's the end of Q1. We're about to hit April. And what delight have you turned up for us in the way of coffee for this month?
Well, we've got some really good ones here. So for coffee, we're working with Baixada, which Square Mile has roasted for espresso, but we're going to try it in a couple of different ways. And chocolate-wise, we're working with, I'll let you say them. You can maybe pronounce them better than me.
We've got two bars, both of them with Peruvian beans. One is basically from LIM, which stands for Less is More, from Federico and Francesca. And the other is from the wonderful Mark, who is American but works in Chile. And as all of you who are good at geography will know, Chile is a phenomenal country for things like wine and for grapefruits like the maqui, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But it does not actually grow its own cacao, so it brings it in from Peru. But those are the two bars that we're going to have. And I think an inspired contrast, which is one of the themes that we want to come up with today.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then Baixada is from Brazil, so we've got a whole South American tour going on this time.
So we're definitely doing that one. And then what do you think we should start with? Should we start with the classic dark?
You know, I actually think in this case that the maqui might be better to start with.
We're going to start with the maqui, and we're going to start with the filter interpretation of this coffee.
Yeah, so as I said, the Baixada here, Square Mile is roasting it for espresso, and that's where we find it to be the most expressive, but we brewed the same roast here as filter, and it's also delicious, but really gives a different character, so a lot more mellow, so we're going to try that with the chocolates now.
We are. I'm going to take a quick sip. That is wonderfully mellow.
Yeah, it's really nice.
That is super mellow. I mean, that is absolutely what we're after. And actually, I get why you're going to compare this, because this is a classic Pangoa bean, but what we're going to try it with is a dark milk, and it's also got some maqui berry added to it, which is native from Chile. Super high in antioxidants, one of those sort of miracle foods. But what it does is it really brings out the creaminess, I think, and the milkiness. So it'll contrast beautifully well with inspired.
Delicious, yeah. Yeah, something that really stood out to me when we were picking the pairings for this, I usually I don't know why I have a little bit of a personal prejudice away from choosing bars that have things added to them, because we want to make sure that you get to enjoy the complexity of chocolate and coffee in this. But the addition of the maqui berry in here is really subtle, and I think it actually really adds to the bar and is a really holistic experience. It's not like chocolate and then the additive.
I think you're absolutely right. I think we have this problem with additives, Jeremy. They're wonderful. I mean, inclusion bars, additive bars are fantastic, but you're sort of often going to get more of one than the other. They're not always that harmonious. What's intriguing about this is that the maqui gives it more balance almost, and it gives it more smoothness without in any way trying to fight over the flavors. Because often what I find is when you get an inclusion bar, in a way they're actually the easiest to pair with something like a beer or a wine, because you're just basically focusing on one note. But when you have something like coffee or craft chocolate, you get all these amazing depths and complexities of flavor. And actually that's the fun part, I think, with trying to get it to right. But absolutely inspired, and well done to you for coming up with this, but well done to Mark. It's got almost a sort of minty note at the back, hasn't it?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. And I really feel like it just matches the flavors of the Baixada so well. So Baixada is the name of a farm of a great farmer we've been working with for a couple of years named Helison Afonso. Helison and his dad Chao, who started the farm, they run a couple of different farms, but they're real kind of the farm just started within their generation. They kind of, I don't want to say that they came from nothing, but they've seen a real arc with their farming journey and now are really successful. And all with organic and biodynamic methods, which is super uncommon for Brazil and something that I always like to highlight with them. And the coffee's delicious.
The coffee is absolutely delicious. And we're going to have to find some Brazilian chocolates now soon to sort of start pairing that one with. But again, I think going back to the pairing that you've got here, I think that it's a very, very creamy milk, and it melts beautifully. But I think its other great feature is that I think it's what you said, it's sort of the balance. And I think what Mark, who's American, who went out to Chile, has just done so brilliantly is actually sort of put the idea of craft chocolate on the map for Chile. And, hats off to him there, because it's not the easiest thing to do. But he also does some amazing pairings with wine. And he makes a whole range, everything from 100% down to a white chocolate. And he does do a couple of really interesting flavors. And he often uses Chilean native berries and herbs. So we've got a Rico Rico, which is beautiful and minty. But this one is one of my absolute favorites. So I'm really glad that you picked up.
Nice. So is the maker Obolo?
The maker is Obolo, made by a guy called Mark Gerritz, who's an American, who's down there, works incredibly hard. He brings the beans in from Pangoa in Peru, because Peru is the nearest place where you can grow cacao and bring it in easily. And he is kicking off a storm, absolutely doing brilliantly. So hats off to him.
Lovely. All right. Let's try the second chocolate with our filter. So you said this is LIM chocolate makers. You said it stands for less is more.
It is. And I'm going to be very unfair, and we haven't rehearsed this at all. I'm going to ask you to look at the packaging and see what you think the packaging reminds you of, and see what the link is to the naming. So you're going to all have to have a quick look at this. It took me a week of basically discussing it with Federico and Francesco to actually sort of get the link. But now I do get the link. It sort of works reasonably well.
All right. There's mountains and clouds.
Yeah, that's exactly what I got. So believe it or not, these are icebergs. And the idea is that you're seeing the top of the iceberg, and that's what rhymes with less is more. So his whole ethos, it is, it's a wonderful story. And once you've got the story, you can look at the packaging again and get, yes, this really is less is more. But it's not, say, as intuitively obvious as some packaging. But anyway, let's give it a go. But on his packaging, he also does a fantastic way of describing how he crafts it all. And one of the things that I sort of love in particular is that his mechanic for winnowing here is sort of quite distinctive. So if you're worrying about and puzzled by why there is a hairdryer on the inside of this packaging, this is because when you basically, after you've roasted the beans, one of the things you need to do is to get the shells off the beans. So you'll generally do what's called cracking, which is you'll break them out, and then you've got to separate out the shells from the nibs. And the easy way to do that is actually with a hairdryer, because the shell is much lighter than the nib, so you can blow it away. And that's what he is still doing. The next thing he'll probably graduate to is a vacuum cleaner, which has got various devices. And then he will probably end up investing in one of these great winnowing machines, which you start with. But it is wonderful just to think that, he is still producing small batches, really small batches. It takes him about 6 to 9 months to actually get the bars we need from him for one of our subscription boxes, largely because he literally does it by hand and with the hairdryer.
I did that when I was living and working on the cacao farm in Brazil. It would, just when we make small batches just for us, you just use whatever you can, right?
You can just use absolutely whatever you can.
That is so good.
It's lovely and fruity, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a complete contrast. I think actually you've done an amazing job here, because you've got to do both these bars on at the same time. In fact, we're going to give you a little bag this time to go with your boxes, just to sort of make sure that you can keep both of them going at the same time, because they are absolutely takes you on a completely different journey. I'm now getting all sorts of fruity notes,
right,
as well as the mellowness and the balance.
Yeah, I think a really nice thing about Baixada is that it has sort of the smoothness and some of the refined nuttiness, like almond butter flavors that you would hope for with a Brazilian coffee. But it also kind of gives you these little bits of white grape and kind of like a slightly effervescent thing going on. And I think that is what this bar is all about. And so when you put them together, it's really nice.
It is. It does have that sort of slight frissons. And when you said white grapes originally, I was trying to imagine what that would be like when you gave us the tasting notes to try and match to. That you've absolutely nailed it. And I wouldn't have associated this bar before you said it with white grapes, but now I'm very, very clearly getting that sensation.
Nice. Excellent. All right, on to espresso.
What a treat. What a treat. And as you were sort of saying, this is going to be very different as an interpretation. You can already sort of smell it in the nose.
Yeah, I feel like this coffee is really, really well suited to an espresso roast. So,
it's beautifully balanced.
It's nice, right? Yeah, you really get a lot more of that kind of florality and the white grape and sort of like high tone tropical that we were talking about before just comes out a bit more. Yeah. So we're going to try the pairing in reverse order this time. So now we're trying the LIM bar first. The Gran Nativo Blanco beans
From Pura in northern Peru.
Exactly.
And it's called a porcelana because when you cut the beans open, a lot of them are white, which confused people at first. They thought it had actually gone extinct, but rediscovered. And very interesting because it actually differs hugely between different harvests there. Fruitiness. Even more floral and fruity and citric. I'm actually getting slightly less of it'll be interesting when we go back to try it with the dark milk. I'm getting slightly less of the white grapes, but I'm getting all that citrus and all that effervescence.
Yeah. Sometimes in coffee we talk about phosphoric acidity. So a little bit more of that kind of like green fruits, like kiwi and green grape, and like a little bit of a tangy effervescence. When I tried this bar, actually, it reminded me of the candy sweet tarts, just sort of like that little sparkle.
Yeah, it is, but it's a sparkle rather than a sourness. It's not a sharpness. It is more of an effervescence. And it is, yeah, I'm definitely getting some of those green, almost green apple actually. A skin from that, almost a sort of zest that you get.
Yeah, or like, I don't know, like a complex kind of like grapefruit. I don't know. I've noticed that grapefruit is more of a negative, or people relate more negatively to grapefruit here in the UK versus in the US. I don't know. Maybe.
That may be true. I think we probably associate greatness with being sharper and a little bit more bitter and having less juiciness. But actually, I think grapefruits is amazing. I think the other fruit, which is sadly much harder to get and underestimated, is pomelo. Pomelo, whatever you want to pronounce it. And this almost has got sort of grapefruit, pomelo. It's definitely not sort of mandarin or orangey, but it is still citric, and it is.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, should we try the other one?
We're going to go back to Mr. Mark. Again, I'm getting that nice sort of maqui berry note.
Need to try a maqui berry so I can
put it in context. Yeah, very high in antioxidants, and again, it's a great sign of how Chile is massive in agricultural exports. One of the largest exports that Chile has is, believe it or not, cherries.
I believe that. Seems like the right weather for cherries.
And a lot of them go to China.
Man, this chocolate just grows on me more and more every time I try it.
But that, again, it brings out the mellowness in just the most fantastic way.
Yeah, I feel like the LIM bar gives you kind of like the high tones in the coffee, and then this Obolo bar gives you more of like the low tones. Like, you primed me by saying cherry, but it is sort of giving me more like a winey cherry note.
It is definitely, yeah, if I was sort of thinking of a wine, it would be a sort of a Pinot or a Gamay or maybe even a Carmenère, but not a sort of very heavy red, but it is.
Yeah.
It was fantastic coffee though.
Nice. Great combo.
Fantastic combo. So again, just brilliantly well done by Jamie and James and Flick and Sarah and the team here. And what we've got is less is more, Obolo. Both beans are sourced from Peru, Pura, Gran Blanco, Pangoa, and then this amazing Brazilian coffee, which works phenomenally as both a filter and as an espresso. You're getting two great opportunities to play with it.
Definitely. Thanks again to Hellison for producing this beautiful coffee, and thanks for the great pairing, Spencer.
Thank you, Jamie. You're great pairing, and safe trips, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you very much.